Hey everyone, so I'm making another video on the Warcraft log because I found something today that I think is a really big game changer for me in how I can go on to actually use these logs to up my game and make sure that I am improving, and same thing for all of you. So the first thing I would go to is, the rankings, but it's not to actually look at the rankings. It's to swap it from today to historical. Maybe there's another way to do this, I don't know, but I'm going to click on historical. And that's telling the logs that I'm going to care about how I am doing historically. And it's going to compare me for any of those fights. So now let's look at, or for everyone for those fights. So let's look at Vale. And I'm just going to choose myself for this one. And this is, again, looking at historically, how am I doing on Vale? And so what we're going to see is it's going to have me written down for what I did today, but for all of these logs that deal with me, we're now going to have this whole breakdown, literally week by week, as to how I've performed, how long have the fights gone on, what is my DPS, what are my parses. And we don't really care about this today's percentile parses because this is putting it in terms of how we're doing today. We care about how we historically were doing. And what's mostly going to be important is, are you improving with respect to time? So for example, I can see here on Vale, these parses where I was performing lower, these are in February and March, right? And then as we shift up, we're going to start going into April and March. And here we are, I'm in May. And so my highest parses are in this month, and that's really good. So that's showing that I'm consistently showing improvement as I go. And my gear is probably going to follow suit. And sure enough, here we are in the beginning. I'm in the mid 60s. Here I'm hovering around 70, and now I've gone up a couple more eye levels. I'm hovering in those low 70s. And even so, I'm still improving in general with respect to time. Sure, here I was at my highest parse on May 1st, and here I am on the very last parse we just had. But you can see that all of these are still very recent. All of these are still very close. This layer of historical granularity can be really helpful to see, are you comparing well just in terms of yourself? Ignore what other people are doing. And then once you see ideally your growth, you get to also look at, does this align in general with my gear? There may be, of course, a fight or a night where that is just thrown out because you died really early or because you just crit in every single thing. But in general, you should be able to see a trend in your own fights. So Vale is actually an awful fight for me to look at. Let's look at something like Broodlord, which is much more consistent. And again, here I am, I see some February, March. There's a little bit of April creeping in, but again, February, March for all along here. And then I have some Mays, Marches, April. I'm all over the place. Here I have, I guess my highest parses are here in May, which is good. But this one, this one was the most recent. That's kind of trash in comparison. But we can again see in general that there's going to be a growth, right? Here, I still have some 70s, but my lower 60 numbers in terms of eye level are down here. My upper eye levels are here. And I'm still going to go on to ask, what did I do different on the specific fights for May 1st, for example, where I did poorly versus more recently where I did a lot better? Was it just crits? What would it be? And with that, I can just look back in the logs. But this is a great way to not really just feel like you need to compare yourself to your peers or compare yourself to something that doesn't seem applicable. It's just, how do you compare in terms of yourself? What has been your growth overall? And again, you can select this for any of the fights. How do we do on Chromag, which we took down that night? Again, I should be showing growth. Unfortunately, again, here's some May parses. Here's basically our March, February parses. But I can do this for anyone, right? I can go on to select anyone. I can do this for healing. How are we doing? Etc. And all of this was broken down for specifically me. How do I personally tend to perform historically across months? And that's something that's also going to showcase for you, how are you doing overall? Over the last 6 months, how are you breaking out? And you're going to have a consistent trend. And obviously, you want to show growth. You want to be able to take that forward. So I think this is a really helpful tool. I encourage everyone to use it to be able to see how they can grow. And of course, always go back and check those logs and see what you can do.